All right, chapter 12, stop being chief problem solver. The funny thing about becoming a leader is you usually get there because lots of experience and capability. And when you're in that position, it becomes very common for people to want to ask you questions and get your opinion. And our egos love it. Hey, Kevin, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? What do you think about this? What should I do? What's your advice? Those are music to our ears. Those kinds of questions make us feel great and valued and important. Unfortunately, as a leader, if you fall into the trap of actually answering them, you're doing a bad job. Our job as leaders is to teach people to make their own decisions, to make themselves independent, not dependent, and to have them get stronger on their own without us. But yet, if we keep answering their questions, we're keeping them from learning on their own and mastering things themselves. So the question in the chapter is, how skilled are you at helping people to become strong, independent thinkers and leaders? There's a proverb that you've probably heard 100 or 1,000 times in your life. Give a man a fish and he eats for a day. Teach a man to fish and he eats for a lifetime. And this is what we're talking about with leadership, is teaching people how to think for themselves, how to decide for themselves, how to take on responsibility for themselves. The key point and the key challenge in this chapter is to require your team to make 90% of the decisions in their area on their own. That's right, 90%. To get them to that point, this links back to one of the earlier chapters about making yourself useless. So when you stop being chief problem solver, train people to solve things on their own, sooner or later they don't need you. And either your ego will love that or it'll terrify you. Either way, just know this is what helps you to grow, and it's extremely rewarding to watch others grow as well. So you need to work on this if you are bombarded every day with people asking your opinion, even though you might like it. People ask you the same types of questions over and over again. You're involved in many small to medium-sized decisions because your team won't make a move without you. You have a long list of unresolved issues and open debates. You regularly get stuck handling other people's problems. The hot potato gets passed to you, and for some reason you think you're supposed to manage it versus handing it back. One of the key techniques in this chapter is teaching people how to break through the I don't knows. When someone comes to you with a challenge and you ask them, well, what do you think we should do in this case? Or how would you solve this on your own? The most common response is, I don't know. Interestingly, what I found is that's actually not the truth. What they're really saying to you is, I can't come up with a good answer at the moment. So here's a technique called breaking through the I don't know that works really, really well. Team member comes to you and says, hey, I'm not sure what to do here. What do you think? And your response is, well, what do you think you should do? Their response is, I don't know. Your response is, well, take a guess. Their response is, I don't know. Your response is, well, take a wild guess. What is something you could do? Their response is, I don't know. Your response is, well, what would you do if I wasn't here to help you and you had to decide? By now, they should be coming up with something, even if they don't. Your response would be, well, if your life depended on it, what would you do? If they still don't know, well, if your children's lives depended on it, what would you do? And it's starting to get a little bit silly, but you get the point. People almost always know. People are innately intelligent. They're innately creative. Our job is to drag it out of them. If you go through this sequence with them and say, what would you do? Take a guess. Take a wild guess. Don't worry if you get it wrong. What would you do if I wasn't here? What would you do if your life depended on it? Your children's life depended on it. It just pushes back and forces them to think, and 95% of the time something great comes out of their mouth. Because the truth is, they do know. They're either just having a problem accessing it, or they're afraid to say. So the real simple summary here is, make people think for themselves and they'll actually get better at it. If you want to grow, your people have to grow. And unfortunately, often our people don't grow because we're not putting enough of the onus of the thinking on them. So here's a challenge I'd like to leave you with on this chapter. Who on your team could you start getting to make 90% of the decisions for their area of responsibility? Who is there that you know probably has the capability, but you're not forcing them to? Second step, go talk to them about this today. Get them to read the chapter, talk to them about the principle, and work together on getting them to make most of their own decisions. And if you ask leaders and people that report to you, a majority of the time, they would love to decide on their own because then that makes them feel good and empowers them. Going back to the tools, if you look at your plan for the next quarter, this might be the habit you focus on in the middle of the plan there, or at the top, it might be one of your goals for the quarter to help one of your executives get to making 90% of their own decisions on their own. So in summary, you can stop being chief problem solver quite easily and train your people to make most of the decisions on their own. If you're worried about them making bad decisions, get them to come to you with recommendations and run that by you first. No matter what, if you're continually answering trivial, low-level questions, there's no way you're going to move ahead to a higher level. And odds are, you're holding your people back.